All right, I think we'll start us off. First, I want to thank everybody for making it 9 a.m. this morning. I think there was, as announced after Richard Wrangham's speech, there was a series of follow-up social meetings last night. So I think a lot of us have maybe not slept as much, but that's also part of the EISS, the social networking that's important to build up these the supports social networks that will also help when you get on the job market. But today is our second roundtable after the first roundtable that we had yesterday. That was more on the substance of the future of the study of war, and we'll have a final roundtable this evening, chaired by Sharka, who's joined us on the gender inclusivity and security studies. And today is one of those roundtables that we've started offering for the past 2 years. The first one was in Berlin. We had one last year in Barcelona. These are primarily targeted towards junior scholars. This could be PhD students or scholars that have just started as postdocs or assistant professors or junior positions teaching or research. And is aimed to navigate notably two types of roundtables we've offered. One is navigating the job market. What are the do's and don'ts when you get on the job market and apply to certain positions, and then get maybe the opportunity of a job talk, etc. And some advice we can give. And the other one that we offered in Barcelona last year, for instance, was about publishing strategies, where to apply for. Where to send your manuscripts and what are the best ways to get through desk reject process and then get the best way to get through the review process. And so we'll be offering these two, but we welcome any input also from the crowd for things we can types of roundtables we can offer in the future for that particular audience. And today I'm very happy to have 3 participants in this particular roundtable that focuses on navigating the job market. One of the members is joining us online. They couldn't make it to Prague this year, but for very good reasons. Dr. Silvia D'Amato is assistant professor at the Institute of Security and Global Affairs, ISCHA, at Leiden University, as a colleague of mine in a different faculty. And she's part of the research group on terrorism, political violence and war, peace and justice. And interesting, I'll talk a little bit also about their career, because I think it's important to see how they moved around and have been in different positions and have been on different types of job markets. So prior to joining Leiden University, Silvia was Max Weber Fellow at the European University Institute, as well as adjunct professor and interim academic coordinator for James Madison University program in Florence. And in the room with us, there's Dr. Alexander Lanoszka, who's assistant professor of international relations at the University of Waterloo in Canada. And prior to joining Waterloo, you taught also at City University of London. And you also had fellowships, I think, at MIT and Dartmouth. So you can also talk about these other fellowship opportunities and the relevance when you're on the market, etc. And last but not least, Dr. Sanne, Verschuren, assistant professor of international security at the Frederick S. Party School of Global Studies at Boston University. And prior to joining Boston University, Sanne was also a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellow at Center for International Studies. And you were also, I think, a Stanton Nuclear Security postdoctoral fellow at Stanford. So, and also a postdoctoral fellow at the Belfast. Yeah. So, and prior to that, you also had studied in Europe, in Belgium at Ghent University, both an LLB and an LLM. And then you moved to USO UK, right? SOAS and a master at SOAS and a master in political science from Brown University. So also a lot of what motivated the formation also this panel is this also transatlantic kind of experience on the job market, having applied and been in positions on both sides of the Atlantic, and some comparison can be made between the different types of strategies of applying and navigating the job market on these 2 different markets, which I would say when I started my PhD about 15, a little bit more than 15 years ago. These job markets were so different, and I think there's been some convergence over the years and more discussions and movement actually across these job markets. So I think a lot of the relevant and recent experience in getting jobs or postdocs in various institutions, but also some experience, I think, with some of us on being on the other side of the hiring process, being in the hiring committees, notably. So I think that's important. I sent, just as also a qualifier before we start this, the presentations, I sent the following questions to the three panelists. What to do in preparation of entering the job markets, how to write CVs, research, and teaching statements and cover letters, and how to prepare a job talk, and then if you get through these different steps, how to negotiate eventually job offers once you get them. So, and to add anything they felt could be also relevant for this discussion. So I asked them to just talk for 5-7 minutes each. Maybe we'll have a follow-up discussion between the panelists, but then we'll open it up quickly to the floor, and hopefully you can give us your own input and share your experience or ask questions to the panelists. I didn't present myself, but I've been introduced a couple of times already. As coordinator of this conference, but I'm Dr. Nicolas Blarel. I'm an associate professor in international relations at Leiden University, and I'll maybe share also some of my insights. I've been over the last 10 years at Leiden director of studies and also on a lot of hiring committees. So I'll share maybe also some insights on my own experience in that process. But let's start right now with Sanne. You can start us off, and then Alex and Silvia. Thank you. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Nico, for organizing. Very nice to see you all this morning, very early. So I'll talk about things in 3 different buckets. So I'll first give a little bit of background on my own experience, which Nico already did a little bit. Then I'll give some general advice and then more specific advice. The question for negotiations, I'm happy to talk about too, but maybe a little bit for the Q&A.
Yeah.
So my own experiences, I'm originally from Belgium, and I did my bachelor's and master's in Belgium. Then I went to London for a year, and then afterwards I started my PhD at Brown. So I did 6 years there. The last year was a pre-doctoral fellowship at the Belfer Center at Harvard. Then I did a postdoc at Stanford, and then I had a Marie Curie fellowship at Sciences Po the year after. And then this year is the first year that I worked as an assistant professor at university. And so I was on the job market for 3 stints, but they were a little odd. The first one was COVID. Which was, so in the US program, you go on the market in the final year of your PhD. So that was my 6th year. And you prep for this for a long time, and you're very excited about this. And then COVID hit, and all the jobs disappeared. So there were basically no jobs to apply to. There were only postdocs, which in hindsight, I'm quite happy to talk about that too, because I had told myself that I actually wanted to do a postdoc first, or a couple of postdocs, because I have a relatively large project. And so I needed time to wrap up my project beyond the PhD. But like once you hit the market, there can be insane amounts of pressure to apply to jobs that you're not even that interested in, or that's not your priority at the time. So one of my pieces of advice is stick with your guts, stick to your guts. Like, you know where you want to live, you know what type of academic job you want. There will be insane amounts of pressure to do everything, but you don't have to. Stick with your own priorities, stick with your own plan. Also on that note, there are a lot of different types of academic jobs that people aren't always told about. There's like an assistant professor track at a research university, but there's also teaching in more teaching-oriented colleges. There is more programmatic academic jobs. So there's like a lot of types of academic jobs out there, and it's important to kind of differentiate with that. Then the 2nd year was on the market. It was very short because I got a Marie Curie fellowship. So I was only on the market for like a week, 2 weeks or something. So I didn't apply to very many jobs. And then the final one, when I was at Sciences Po, I was a full cycle on the US job market. And then I got the job. So that's kind of my experience. So then my general advice, the job market is a really, really, really hard process, right? There's no easy way to go about it. There are a lot of us, and there are not that many jobs. So it's really a bottleneck. And you need a little bit of luck. The process, I would say, looking back at it, is not entirely random. I do think that the right people end up in the right jobs, but the problem is that you don't really know what people are looking for, when you're on the job market, right? Like you'll see these ads as, we want an assistant professor in international relations. I mean, that can mean 700 different things. And you don't know what's going on inside the search committee, inside the department. Are they replacing someone? Are they looking for someone specific? What are you looking for methodologically? So all that information makes it really hard to navigate. So the thing you can do is to make the best possible application, to write the materials, to be ready. And then you need a little bit of luck that you're the right person for that job. And that's that can take a little bit of time because the right job for you has to open up. Like I'm a deeply qualitative scholar. I'm never gonna fit in a quantitative department, right? Like I'm never gonna be hired by NYU, for example. And so that is true for all of us, right? We're all operating niches. And so it might take a couple of years before you get hired. And so it is very normal to be on the job market a couple of years, but that is very hard because you have a lot of insecurity and a lot of existential dread. And so lean on your friends, lean on your network, do things that make you feel sane in this process, because it is really, really hard to deal with a lot of insecurity. It's also the time to call in your favors. Whenever you read someone else's paper or like did things for other people, when you're on the job market, this is to call you in your favors, to have people read your job market materials, to ask more senior colleagues for their materials when they went on the job market, to have people show up for your practice job docs. Like that's really when you call in all your favors from your community. Try to get as much emotional support as you can during this time. Okay, so more specific advice. So this is gonna be with a little bit of caveats because there's no such thing as one job market. While there is some convergence across different countries at the moment, still there are large differences between being on the job market in the United States and Canada, I assume, and in different European countries. So when you enter the job market and you want to apply for a specific job, ask people in your network, ask your advisors to give advice on what that application is precisely supposed to look like for the country you're applying to, because there are really big differences. So what I'm going to say is very much based on the US job market. And so some of it might carry over, other things might not, and I'm happy to talk more in the Q&A. So basically, US job search has 2 to 3 stages. So the first stage, you send in your written materials. They will assess it. They will make a long list, a short list. Nowadays, they also tend to do Zoom interviews, which are like these 30-minute interviews with the search committee, which is comprised of like 3 to 5 faculty members, where they ask you a bunch of questions. And then if you get through, they'll take 3, 4, 5 people to the final round when you get a flyout. And US flyouts are typically 2 days. They're super intense. Where you have like back-to-back interviews, you have a job talk, and sometimes you also have a teaching demo. So in terms of the materials, you need a couple of things. You need a cover letter, a research statement, a teaching statement, a CV, a diversity statement, although that seems to be going away again, and then a writing sample. It can be incredibly uncomfortable to write these materials because you're in a PhD program or in a postdoc, right? Like you're still figuring out what you're doing. You're still figuring out what the elevator pitch of your dissertation is. You don't know, and somehow now you have to project an entire research agenda. Like in my case, my research agenda has 3 pillars. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing yet. So, but that's also okay. We are all like, even like at my stage, I mean, I'm not that far removed from it. Like we're all very early on, we're all still figuring it out. And we're all going to be projecting in the future with a bunch of ideas that don't really exist yet. And that's fine, because at this stage in the job market, you're hired on your promise. You're not hired on your accomplishments yet, because you have not accomplished that much yet. You're a baby scholar, right? So it's okay to think big, to make some wild promises. But that's, I think, also a little bit the key, is to kind of forward project yourself in these documents as the scholar you want to be 5 years from now, right? So for the cover letter, you have about 1 to 2 pages, or 2 pages, 2.5 pages. Don't go over that. Very like the way I did it is like I have 1 paragraph where I state like kind of here's the places in the role I am at, and here's the 1 sentence of the type of scholar I am, which is in my case I live with the intersection of international relations, international security, and ideas and institutions or something, right? Then you have a paragraph that describes the puzzle of your dissertation. So what what puzzle are you addressing? What's your research question? What's your answer, your argument? Then you have a paragraph on your methodology. How did you answer your question? Did you get any grants? Like you also want to list any type of support you got, because that are markers of success. Then you have about a paragraph where you talk about implications, and then you talk about other projects you have, and also one paragraph. Then you have a paragraph on teaching. If you're in a teaching institution, you kind of swap the order a little bit, and you do a little bit more on teaching, and you might put your teaching stuff first. And then I have personally for policy school, I have a policy paragraph where I talk about what kind of things I want to accomplish in policy. And then I have a concluding paragraph about service I've done and service I want to do to the discipline, to the department and the discipline, and who I want to work with and how I want to situate myself in the department. That's kind of the structure that I have. I don't know if you guys have similar structures. For the research statements, mine is pretty long. Mine was I think they say 3 to 4 pages. I was at 5. And that basically, in my case, it lays out the 3 pillars that I think my research agenda has, and it attaches all the different projects that I'm currently working on, are the projects I'm working on in the near future under each of these pillars. Then you have a teaching statement, which in my case consisted of a teaching philosophy, which is about a page where you lay out like what the 5 or 6 principles are of your teaching, which is kind of also crazy because you haven't really thought that much. So this is again where you're like really forward projecting. You should definitely ask for language on teaching statements. I'm very happy to give, to have you have a look at my materials, how you can craft that. Then I have teaching effectiveness, which is like your teaching training that you got. If you got any teaching awards, that's where you're going to list. And if you have any evidence from your TAing or from anything else you did, like student evaluations or comments from students, that's where you put those. Then you have your CV, which you can see on websites of people. A diversity statement, I'll leave that for the Q&A if people have asked questions on that. You have a writing sample. There's a lot of this, maybe also, I don't know, am I going over time? Okay, there's also for writing samples. I know, Alexander, what you did, but there's a lot of, especially in the US, there's a lot of fuss about making a job market paper. So a job market paper is like an almost finished product that you could send to a journal. So I'm a book-based scholar. I'm writing a big book. And so I refused to do a job market paper. Instead, I sent like 2-3 chapters of my dissertation. That is very different from what most people did. But the job market paper, the idea is that you want to showcase who you are as a scholar and what the best piece of work is you've got. And I think there is some freedom in how you want to draft that job market paper. So you want to have some indicators of promise, right? So either you've already published something in a good journal, that could be an indicator of promise. Any awards you got are indicators of promise. Any fellowships, any funding, like anything that's competitive, like make sure that that is very visible in your cover letter, that it's visible on your CV, because those are the indicators that set you apart from the rest of the team. That are indicators that you might become a promising scholar. Also, have a website. Have a public persona. I have a website which you can look at. I mean, I don't know, it's pretty easy to make. I'm not super good with computers, but like some of these programs are pretty easy to navigate. People look at those things. People look at your online stuff, maybe a Twitter profile, like post a little. I post very little, but like a little bit here and there. Also networking. The year you're on the job market or the year before, go to conferences like this, go to big conferences, show up, go to online workshops, anything your resources allow you to go to, try and like meet everyone, because ultimately we're not a really big world. And if you know the people who are hiring, that will give you a leg up in the search process, because they're getting so many applications that whatever you can do to make yourself stand out helps. And then the other thing is that it's your advisor have a responsibility towards you getting a job. And so you do not just ask for letters of recommendation, which you will also need 3 to 5 letters of recommendation. But you can also ask them to make calls for you. Like I would send a list with the 5 jobs I wanted most to my advisors. And then I don't know if they effectively did, but I think my advisors make calls for me. And that's very, very common that your advisors do that for you. So keep your advisors in the loop about the jobs you want to apply for, why you want particular jobs, and you can ask them to really call in a little bit of favor on your behalf. So I'm also happy to talk about first round interviews and flyouts, but I think I'll pass it to you and then we'll see where we go.
Sure.
Well, thanks, Sanne.
Thank you so much, Sanne. You actually made my job easier or tougher because you said so much that I want to say. My name is Lanoszka. I'm Canadian. I did my PhD in the United States, but as Nicolas had just mentioned, I also have some experience working in Europe. My first full-time job was in the United Kingdom at City University of London, and I've worked there for 2 years prior to coming back to Canada, or I presently work at the University of Waterloo. So I can say a bit about both job markets, Canadian and British. The Canadian job market is a lot like the American job market. And I understand that on the continent, there is a convergence of sorts between what we're seeing in the Anglo-Saxon world. But I do want to emphasize that there is some sort of hesitation that I do have in these sorts of roundtable discussions, precisely because I'm a survivor. And I've experienced far more failure than success. I don't think I batted, I mean, maybe baseball reference is something wrong thing to invoke here, but I definitely did not bat at least 100. I think for every interview I got, I experienced 20 or so rejections. It's a fact of life, and there's so much of the process over which you have no control whatsoever, especially if it's a single line. If there are multiple lines, there could be some opportunities for horse trading between various members of the faculty, considering whom to hire. But in general, if you think that there are 10 steps, you might have control of 3 of those 10 steps, and those steps really pertain to the quality of the dissertation as well as your network. But so much of it is really out of your hands. I cannot stress enough how important the role of luck really is. I am very lucky. In 2 of the 5 interviews that I've had, there were inside candidates. In one instance, the inside candidate did win. In the other instance, I beat the inside candidate. But the fact of the matter is that does happen. So we cannot take failure personally because it's just going to happen so much. So with all that said, I want to just make 5 big picture points. 1, less is more. 2, answer the brief. 3, there's no such thing as too much practice. And 4, build a winning coalition. I guess that's 4 points. So the first point is less is more. Sanne already mentioned how your cover letter should be no longer than 2 pages. I fully agree with how she structures it. That's how I structured it. Make sure that you're very economical in your language. I have seen so many cover letters being on the other side where there's just so much fluff. There's just so much discursive elements that I had a hard time following what the applicant was trying to get across. Bear in mind that oftentimes we have to read many applications, especially in today's markets. In some instances, some jobs receive about 100+ applications. So if you cannot get across clearly within 30 seconds of someone reading your cover letter, then that's a failure. So you have to make sure that your identity, your main research points come across as clearly as possible. Keep your CV short, emphasize firstly your education and then your publications. If your publications appear on page 4, page 5, that's not a good thing. It suggests that you're trying to hide what you've already published, or that you just don't know what to prioritize as regards to the layout of your CV. The second point is answer the brief. There is going to be variation across the Euro-Atlantic world, as it were, as to what universities want in a particular interview. So in both the United States and in Canada, there is a tendency to have a 40 or so minute job talk followed by a 30-minute Q&A, in addition to a teaching demonstration. Do that. Do what is asked of you. If in the United Kingdom, as I've experienced it, you have a 20-minute teaching presentation, or pardon me, a 20-minute research presentation that is supposed to clarify your research agenda, do that. Do not be clever. Do not ignore the brief. After all, again, those on the selection committee have a lot of time, don't have a lot of time. They have a lot of applicants. You need to work through as much material as possible. If they see that you can't prioritize the right things or you're not following directions, it just leaves a bad taste and they're simply going to mark you for failure. The third is that there's no such thing as too much practice. I remember in graduate school, I was told, perhaps slightly flippantly, that you want to be in a situation with your talk, whether it is a 40-minute job talk, the sort that Sanne described, or a 20-minute research presentation of the sort that I did at City University of London, that you can do such a talk at 2 a.m. in the morning, drag out of bed. That you have so internalized the content and the language of your talk that you can do it whenever and wherever. And that if you do get nervous, and I tended to be a little nervous when I was a speaker, when I was much younger, that you can still fall back on the internal script that you have, so that you can just pair it and then eventually get there. First 5 minutes are usually the most difficult, and then you'll be able to persevere and succeed all the same. But that means that you have to go about practicing extensively in front of various audiences, particularly those that involve your peers or your senior colleagues. In my own experience, I'll state flatly that you need to express what your main research question and findings are within the first 2 to 5 minutes. If you wait until slide 7 to talk about your research question, I'm sorry, it's a failure. No one will understand what is going on if you use too many anecdotes at the outset. Unconnected to who you are as a scholar, people are simply going to tune out and they're just going to move on. So make sure that you get the bottom line up front very quickly and then proceed logically over the course of the presentation. And again, do so in view of what is being asked and expected of you by the search committee. And the fourth one is perhaps trivial, but I think is oftentimes overlooked, and that is to build a winning coalition. Be open to teaching whatever is asked of you in the interview. So at City University of London, I came in as someone who studies international security. I did do a minor, as it were, in my PhD studies in comparative politics. So I said I could teach comparative, sure enough. I had to teach comparative in my first year. I was also asked if I would be okay with teaching political theory. Of course, I said yes. Beggars cannot be choosers. So you have to demonstrate an openness to do what is asked of you. You don't necessarily have to follow through, and chances are, as I've experienced at City, after 1 year of doing those chores or those things that were asked of you, you don't have to do them anymore. But it demonstrates that you're open to be a team player and that you're not going to be inflexible. When it comes to one-on-one meetings, ask lots of questions. I think studies have found that people talk a lot. They think that the meeting went really, really well. So I try to get the other person to talk as much as possible. If you're talking too much in a meeting, in a one-on-one meeting, then chances are it's not going well. It's just people like to talk, and we evaluate the candidates accordingly. It seems silly, but just be prepared to ask lots of questions. Ask about the research even. Ask about the quality of the work-life balance in that particular community. Express curiosity. Express even an openness to move to that city. At Waterloo, I dare say that I said, yeah, I'm going to move to Waterloo. I had no intention ever of moving to Waterloo. I live in another city. But I did not clarify that because why would I? I don't want to show my. So of course, I entertain conversations about that. By having zero intention of following through. But it's about building a winning coalition all the same, and that's what you want to do. So that's pretty much all I have to say there. But I'm sure there are many, many questions that you have, so I look forward to
Perfect. No, thanks, Alex. A lot of also good practical advice, which I think also apply also to the both apply very well to also to some of it, not all of it, obviously, but to the European job market. But talking about the European job market, let's talk to Silvia, who can also share her insights from her experience.
Yes.
Thanks, Silvia.
Thank you, Nico. And I'm sorry again that I will not be I'm not there with you guys physically, but thank you for having me online as well. I second pretty much everything that has been already mentioned by my colleagues. So I'll try not to repeat things, but please do forgive some potential overlapping, because there were some very important points that I think it's crucial to reiterate. Indeed, as Nico mentioned, I mostly have an European experience. So let's say my 5 to 6 minutes will mostly be reflecting the experience that I had across European universities. And I'm Italian, so I have this Southern European also kind of experience and weird relationship with Southern European academia world. But also I live and I work in the Netherlands. So let's say that I have a mixed up view on these issues. In terms of preparation for the job market, it has been briefly mentioned, but I would probably emphasize more that from what I've seen when I was applying, and also what I'm now seeing when I'm in selection committee, many candidates are also, even at the early career stage, are also evaluated for the diversity of experiences they can bring, right? So my first suggestion would be try to diversify as much as possible your expertise. Obviously, as has been mentioned by Sanne, we don't expect to recruit only on what you have done in the past, but we also recruit on the potential that you can show, obviously. But I see that we're still looking for small evidence of different expertise. So try not to focus only on your research, on the best research ever, but try to see if you can develop some expertise in teaching. This is more difficult for PhD programs who don't allow teaching, as was my PhD program. I couldn't teach for 4 years, but I still try to ask colleagues and senior colleagues if I could, for instance, do a guest lecture, right? So try to see if you can collect guest lectures in different courses, ideally maybe different universities, just to show that you have some teaching expertise already if you're applying for, even up for a postdoc. Same for admin or event-related organization, right? If you have some minimum admin expertise, or you planned or you try to organize some academic events, some workshops, I think it's already a great added value to show, you know, that you are able to do and to cover multiple tasks. And this is highly appreciated. For instance, let me tell you that at EISS now in Leiden, the process is quite standardized. And we literally have an Excel spreadsheet with all the different columns of teaching, research, admin, networking, international networking, and international presence. So again, you don't have to fill all the boxes, so don't stress too much about it. I don't want to give you, anxiety, overdo it all, but try to see if you can provide small evidence for different things that are usually required. For instance, as a Max Weber Fellow at DY, I had a full scholarship. So I didn't have to teach at all, but being Italian and being quite anxious about finding a job and being quite, let's say, sensitive to precarity and, this craziness of the job market, I was a bit scared, right? So I kept teaching on at James Madison University, which was challenging to keep both. But to be honest, this was the reason why I was eventually selected at Leiden at EISS, because I had both experiences. I had a strong research record, but also some good teaching experience at James Madison. I do second very much the idea of less is better, both in the teaching statements and cover letters, CVs, but also in the job talk, right? You need to be essential. Try to focus on the key elements that you think you are bringing. You don't need to mention everything. We don't have time to go over everything in detail. So try to highlight the best qualities of your research or the best potentiality of your research, focusing really on what you think is best. And to do so, I really recommend to use examples once again. Try to support your claim that you are a good researcher with some evidence. You know, show us where exactly you acquired that specific research skill. Same for teaching, as I was saying. And so try to really focus on the specific contribution, giving examples. That's, at least to us, it's highly appreciated. Also, I'm not a public persona, differently from Sanne. I don't have any social media whatsoever. So I'm very old school, just because it gives me anxiety, not because I'm ideologically against it. But I must say that I'm a very social, real life person, probably because I'm Italian. There is probably this background that helps. This is to say that this is, to me, a different way of building my network and international network, right? So when you're at conferences and when you're at workshop, has been mentioned already, try to connect with those people, not in a negative way, not just for, you know, a pragmatic purpose, but just to engage with different scholars and with different people who have different expertise. Again, the network helped me a lot, not only to get a job, but also to prepare for a job, because different people know what different universities are looking for. Again, I think in the Netherlands and in Leiden, we are specifically looking for a specific type of academic. Very much of the job market that it's happening in the Netherlands, it's teaching based again. So differently from the experience that Sanne shared, we are looking for a variety of profiles. ISGA before was a mostly qualitative institute, but because of the teaching necessities and because we needed to teach quantitative methods to our students, we had to recruit people with a more quantitative expertise that maybe they were doing something very different from what the General Institute and the department was doing. But again, there was a teaching necessities that kind of forced us to look for different profiles. So these are things that you only know if you have someone in the inside. Again, this is not necessarily someone who's going to be in the committee, but someone who's, let's say, in that world, in that national university world. So use the network. Don't be afraid of asking for help, even to senior colleagues. EISS, for instance, is a great platform to do that. We also organize, you know, early career events. So we are very much in favor of exchanging experiences and to have more senior colleagues supporting junior ones. So don't be afraid of asking for advice. How am I doing one time, Nico?
I think you're fine. Yeah.
Yeah?
You're fine.
So maybe, can I mention a couple of things more?
Yeah, go ahead, Silvia. Yeah.
In terms of preparation, very much agree with Alexander. I used to prepare nonstop. Like I used to basically memorize my answers. So try to ask yourself questions, have a list of potential questions that the committee can ask you, and practice. I'm not a native speaker of English, obviously. So, you know, there was also a stressful moment for me to prepare and to go, you know, to this job talk. And ask your colleagues to organize a mock interview. You can literally ask your friends or colleagues to, you know, to set up a fake interview where they ask you questions so you can practice. Because as Alexander was mentioning, it's nerve-wracking to be there. So something can always go wrong. And you need to be, you know, on top of your game and be sure that no matter what happens, you know that you have 1, 2, 3 essential things that you can still say. I think I will stop here for now, but I'm happy to elaborate more on these points. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Silvia, and thanks to all the panelists. I think what we've what we wanted to try to convey here is that it might seem, so for those of you that are currently or about to get on the job market, it seems overwhelming, as was said, a lot of candidates, very few opportunities, and there's a lot of things we can't control, but we do have some agency, and I think you got a lot of practical advice on what you can actually maybe try to control to some degree. And I think, and I'm not gonna, I second or support all of that's what been said, so I don't have much to add, but before opening maybe to specific questions, I would emphasize the argument about, you know, it's good to have a general profile, and I agree, you know, the structure of the letters, of the research statement, teaching statement. Again, these are also, it's not just the North American market. These are required by a lot of continental or UK universities these days. It's ready. It's good to have one ready that you regularly update based on your publications or some other awards or teaching evaluations that you have. But I would still encourage to tailor it as to the positions you're applying, right? So there's some things you can tweak here, emphasize more. I think it's important because we see a lot of application that seems standardized, and they clearly didn't read the job position that was advertised. So it's important to have the right fit. It takes more time to prepare these, and because there's a lot of applications to send, but I think it's important because I think was mentioned, there are a lot of applications that we get, right? It was 1 year, and I was 2 years on a hiring committee for assistant professors in IR, and I think those 2 years in a row, we got 350 candidates for a position, right? So we need to figure out, we can't read carefully all 350. We would like to, it would be the fair way to go at it, but we had to figure out some filtering, you know, mechanisms. So obviously CVs and letters, and if these are not structured the right way, or don't start off with clearly talking about how these candidates would be a good fit, that, you know, that's off to a bad start. And obviously we have to make quick decisions about which candidates we filter in the first time, talk about, and so we obviously reduce the list, etc. So be careful when applying. There are fewer applications this past few years, but there was this couple of years where we had a lot of candidates. But just a couple of other things. I would second doing your homework about the position. I think, and this is very important because knowing the most you can about why a position is opening, right? Is it a replacement? Is it a new specialization that this university or that institute, the department is looking for? I mean, there's a lot that could happen. Or the expansion. I mean, when those applications I mentioned, when we had 350 candidates, we just created a new bachelor program in IR in English in The Hague. Suddenly we needed 10 new assistant professors. So knowing about the context of this helps, and then you can build networks, EISS or ISA, EISA, etc. The more you can meet or directly contact some people that you might know, or someone that you know might know, or your supervisor might know from that institute, will really be helpful, because then you can structure your application to fill that particular need that just emerged or just appeared in that particular institute. And that really gets you, I think, that really helps you distinguish yourself from the other candidates. Quickly, something about the letter. I would argue just as practical advice about the cover letter. It's important to summarize in just the 2 pages who you are, but it also connects all your profile. It's very important to connect, because no one is going to go carefully read the research statement or the teaching statement. They should, but that's how hiring committees are. They'll prioritize reading the letter, and the letter should do a good work of building up a narrative and connecting your different teaching statement, research statement, etc. So I think this is very important. And one last thing about the 2 last things. One about the rejection. Yeah, that's the failure, the impression of failure after getting so many rejection. And I think it's really important that we're open about it. You're gonna get many more rejections, and sometimes you won't even get an answer. That's also something that's really problematic in this field. We might be using more automatic systems where we just press on something and everybody gets this standardized automated that could actually not even happen. So it's all, and you have to write that follow-up email asking where is the selection process. One advice, don't go on those rumor websites. It's actually probably the worst, because there's some discussions about where the state of those application process are, and it's often a lot of misinformation, and it doesn't help with the the dealing with the patients and the rejection. And I'll share when I got into Leiden, I think it was my 120th application that year. It was at the end of my first year on the market. So again, it's you're gonna have to go through that. Those long process could take 1 or 2 years, and but you know, build on your network, support networks, family, friends, academic networks, etc. And you know, and if you're doing this for the PhD process, you add the patients and the patient and enthusiasm to do that kind of research, to teach, etc. So that should also help you get through those difficult process and hopefully towards a positive outcome. One last thing is the projection. That's really important. I would argue it's difficult because you're starting your career and you already got to think 5 years ahead where are you going to be, but you'll get that question. If you're lucky to get to the formal job talk, you will get the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So you need an answer to that, right? What kind of publications should I have? Who am I engaging with in the literature? What grants should I apply? And when you talk about grants you'll be applying to in the next 5 years, think about their ambitious grants at the European level, but also do your homework about national grants. You know, and in the Netherlands, NVO, for instance, if you mention that you're going to apply in the Vici process, etc., that also gets you some positive points with the local culture. And one last thing about some positions, asking about the real estate in Waterloo, my work, but also you will get questions, and especially this comes up in the Netherlands, really some very personal questions about why you're actually applying to the Netherlands and will you stick around. So you might be bluffing a little bit, but you need to have some kind of answers that you're willing to learn the language, to be able to teach, for instance, in Dutch within 5 years. You might not be completely able to do that, but at least show the intention or the willingness to make that effort, etc. That will also get you a lot of positive points with a few colleagues there. I'll stop here because I think there's a lot has been said, a lot of good practical advice, but maybe we should open up if there are more specific follow-up questions on some of the things were mentioned, or people sharing their own input experience. And I see Michael is already raising hand as being on a lot of hiring committees. He probably has a lot of things.
No, coming from what just like last slide that you said, which is that you make bluff a lot of language.
Yeah.
So don't bluff too much.
Yeah.
Because there are universities where they will put in your contract within a year or two, you will have to be able to learn to speak fluent Dutch to be able to teach. And if you don't, they will fire you on the spot without any remorse. So if they ask you if you're willing to learn Dutch, you better answer. And I don't know about other countries, but in the Netherlands, you answer honestly.
Yeah, but make sure we didn't get to the negotiation phase discussion, but we can in the Q&A make sure that you have a clear expectation of what the language requirements would be in your contract. Because you know it could be the different levels that you can actually pass an exam, or it could be more vaguely formulated and then creates sometimes in your favor, sometimes not in your favor. So make sure in the negotiation phase that it's clearly articulated. Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
add one thing?
Yeah.
So maybe one thing to also remember, especially once you get through the interview phase, is people are looking for a colleague and hopefully a lifelong colleague. So they also just want to know that you're a nice person and that you can have a normal conversation. That is also part of what people are looking for. So this comes back to your excellent point about like when you have those one-on-one meetings, ask about people's research. Like I had for every person I was supposed to meet, I wrote a little, I didn't read their entire oeuvre, but I wrote a little blurb for everyone, being like, here's what the researchers they do. Here's a question I can ask them. And here's where I think we have overlap. And with some people, it's very sketchy how you overlap because they have like entirely different research agendas. But I try to find at least one thing I have in common with every single person. And that really helps to get the conversation going and to be the nice person they want to see.
And this could be also signaled already in letter, when your motivation letter overlaps and who you could work with. Just make sure that you read the latest updated website, because we've seen letters with candidates saying they will work with someone that's retired for 10 years. But so that's just one case. But you know, it's important to show that you want to work with colleagues and you see the overlap in research interests. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
We have there's a question from Alessandra. Do you have a question?
Oh, no, okay. And yeah. please.
I'm actually a very early career researcher. I'm just in like I'm a PhD student that just started, so this is I'm nowhere close to going into job blogs, but I was wondering the extent to which I should plan the rest of my PhD, such that I can position myself as someone who's like an expert on a particular topic, as opposed to like a diverse set of things. What has been your experience in the job market? Like what has worked for you and what's not? Like is versatility something that's sought out, or is it more beneficial if you're like a specialist in one perspective to say, oh yeah, I'm a constructivist and I look at whatever specific missions from this one point of view.
One second, mate. Silvia, did you hear the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, excellent. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so it's impossible to predict what the future will be. I started my PhD in 2008, and the market was crashing. It's going to be fine by the time you graduate. It was not fine. I started my PhD my PhD thesis roughly in 2010 to 2011, and it was on nuclear proliferation. And people told me there's no market whatsoever for this topic because what we know about nuclear has already been done. Don't even touch it. And sure enough, within a few years, there were all these fellowships about nuclear, and indeed it was a market. IR is driven by many fads. So in other words, just do what you want to do and do it really, really well.
And then the next step, once you hit the job market, so in your PhD, do what you're interested in, what you love, and what makes your blood boil. That's what you want to do. But once you hit the job market, then you work on translating your research to multiple audiences. So you try to tie in your research with other big debates in the literature. So I model myself as like, I'm an ideational person. I work on institutions, so I'm tying myself into all of these debates, which makes my profile more versatile, even if I'm actually a really narrow expert on a narrow topic, which is what we all are at the end of the day. So it's a PR exercise in some ways.
Silvia, you want to?
Yes, very briefly, just to build on what has been mentioned already. In my case, for instance, I could only find a very first postdoc at the University of Florence on a Horizon 2020 project on migration. And I was coming from security studies, IR, and counterterrorism specifically. I still applied and I got the job because of my methodological skills. So they were not necessarily interested in my expertise on counterterrorism, but because I had the specific methodological skill that they needed for their project, they hired me. So I wasn't too happy, and that likely I got the Max Weber Fellowship after that. But just as a reference, my most cited paper, I think it's still on migration, and people invite me to roundtables on migration, which is a topic that interests me as a human being and citizen, but it's not necessarily my research expertise, right? So I had to sell again a little bit my expertise on a different topic, and I could do that because I had a methodological strength that they needed. So there is a bit, again, here you need to be smart about balancing what you can offer specifically, but also be open if you want to other fields, right? And then you're always able to get back on your feet, and I was able to get back to counterterrorism eventually, but I had this more experience on a different field, let's say. And again, it worked out for me also, again, teaching-wise, because they were interested in someone who had a more, a broader teaching possibility and research capability, but it's not always the same, right? Different institutes and universities might have a different approach on how diverse your profile is.
I think I would support all that has been said. I mean, it's normal to narrow down your research. We all do that to answer a specific question and to identify a niche contribution. But you can still relate to broader questions, and that's what you got to make clear in your research profile or your cover letter, that you're the more specific question you engage in your PhD will be linked to the broader debates, etc. And you know that you have a wide understanding of the broader IR debates, the broader security debates, and you can teach and do research and engage with a wider scholarship. Yeah, I think that just will be a narrative type of formulation when you prepare your profile. But it's you obviously when you're doing your PhD, you're specializing in one particular subfield. Do we have any questions? Sorry, Sharka. Yeah.
I'm sure City Prague and partners also this experience in the hiring process. I will maybe add a comment as a follow-up to what's just mentioned. I don't think like specialization, but rather publication reports. So people look at first. It doesn't need to be extensive in terms of quantity, but really one good publication can make it. So I would think about it in terms of like while doing your PhD, thinking about like ambitious good article in a good journal, highly read, that can really make the biggest difference in selection procedure. Because although the formatting and cover letter and everything, I think especially if it's like a research related job, you have to manifest that you're able to publish, to participate in research projects, to perform at the department. So I think this like ability to do so rather than having like a long extensive like record, what we are interested in is like if you have this experience, you have done it in the past. So this will be, I think, very, very important from my point of view. And then I have a question, maybe also for you. What is your opinion about utilizing AI when preparing the materials? Because we are getting a lot of applications that include cover letter or motivation letter, but even a research proposal, which includes a lot of AI generated text. And I think while it's like perfectly normal to use it at other occasions, for me, it's very off-putting. And I think sometimes I have conversations with people applying, especially if they check before and they send something like in advance. I commented like, definitely try to prevent this, and they were very surprised. Like, why is it not like, recommended, and do you have a statement that like, it's a little bit tricky because it's not like research, it's not like publication, it's still like real application kind of portfolio they are sending. But again, my personal opinion would be not do that, but wondering about your opinion, because I'm searching for authenticity from my point of view, but while it's becoming more and more like standardized to use AI for different purposes, I think very often applicants find it like quite normal to use it for, motivation letter or cover letters.
Yeah.
I would say using AI is a terrible idea. It's well, as you pointed out, I think people are overly optimistic as to what AI can achieve, and quite frankly, a lot of it just produces garbage. And so the language could come across as very contrived and easy to detect. And even if there may be some ambiguity about whether the text was generated by AI or not, the fact that you're asking that question might have you ask other questions about that applicant's file more generally. If they're going to use AI to produce a cover letter, then are they going to use AI to generate lectures, to generate publications even? Where are they going to stop? So don't use it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that builders on what they said. So what's the relative weight you put on research and output related to the other things like teaching, admin, and funding? Second question, for the assistant professorship, and the candidate is 1 or 2 years after PhD. What's the minimum of publication that you would see? My understanding is either about 8 journal articles, some of them journals, or 3 articles in a book. Okay. If you could talk about what
This is
Nico,
a
sorry,
good question.
could you
Yeah, go
repeat
ahead,
the questions? Just because I guess it will be important for the online as well, for the recording as well. They were not super clear.
Exactly. So the question was about the relative weights of research output, teaching, and grants, for instance, in a CV or in the application file. And how to move that around, I guess. And then how many, if you're a few years after your PhD or 2 years specifically, how many publications are expected, and can you actually quantify it? I would say it's true on the CV. On the CV aspect and the relative weight, that's when you tailor to your specific application you're sending. Basically, what is the need for that particular institute that's just had the job application out? Is it a teaching institution? Is it a research institution? What is in actual the brief? What is in the job application? What they're expecting, and then you tailor and you do your little homework, get some info, some intel about that particular job, and try to then put up the relative weight. You also have to show it's a trade-off between that and the comparative advantages. I think if you have little teaching experience, obviously maybe you don't want to put that immediately up in the CV, etc. But and so you have to find some kind of trade-off between trying to provide that you're the right fit, based on what this application is looking for, and what are your comparative advantages. And it's a really relevant question, because the hiring committee on the how many publications post PhD. I mean, in my experience, hiring committees look at the number of years you're out of your PhD and proportionally evaluate the publication output based on that. You're not going to expect a lot of publication from someone who hasn't finished the PhD or just one out in, but you're a little bit more. You're going to be a little bit more. You're going to expect a little bit more for someone 2 outs. You give the specific numbers. I wouldn't think we quantify that much. It depends on the quality of the journal. If you have an APSR article, for instance, you're not going to be as demanding for because it's really hard to get into in that particular journal. You might that and 1 or 2 publications might be sufficient for 2 years post PhD. So I think it depends on the ranking quality of your publication. Same with the book. If you get an Oxford or Cambridge University Press book, obviously that will that already is a strong signal. So it's about what you signal, the quality, and I don't remember any discussion about a specific quantification about the number of articles that are necessary or book manuscripts. As long as you show that you regularly publish, there's a fit in your research program with the kind of journals you apply to and what kind of journals you would keep applying to. I think that's that, and you got a good research strategy linked to the kind of publication output you have or you will prospectively have. I think that's fine. I wouldn't worry about that. I'm not going to apply to this job because I don't have these 8 publications. So I would not try to make these calculations and auto limiting yourself. Yeah. But I don't know what my
and also, I would also say that your publication strategy is very dependent upon the type of researcher you are. If you are doing more quantitative research, some parts of the process go, for example, faster. So it's easier to put out more narrow publications. If you're more qualitative and big project oriented, like I am, your lead times are way longer. But the payoff is that your publications are supposed to be like really high aimed, right? So there's different. Your profile, everyone's research profile and everybody's output profile is incredibly different, and committees will know that because they know what all these different things are. So you need to give some evidence of your ability to do things. You need to give evidence of your promise, but you're still hired on the promise. So you don't need to have a complete tenure file when you're applying for an assistant professor job, right? Like that's for 6 years down the line.
Silvia, you want to add something?
Yeah, thank you. On this specifically, one practical advice may be to work on those publications maybe for good or strong journal that will take longer, but also to balance this with 1 or 2 publications in those journals that are still good, but maybe not as high and not as, let's say, famous and as popular in the field as the previous one, right? So try to balance a bit your publication strategy as well. So to show that you already are working on your publications, but again, it takes time. So you want to be smart about it, maybe focus something very strong that you have, something very unique of your research for the best journals. but also show that you can publish in minor journals just to have some research outputs out there that they can see, or they can prove that you are able to publish. And as also on the first question, if I got it correctly, I think I would also mention that, again, with respect to what I was saying before, you don't necessarily have to have everything, every evidence of every, experience on every field, teaching, research, admin, event organization. But if you miss something that, for instance, is mentioned in the job call, I think you can also, at least what I appreciate and what I seen appreciated in the selection and hiring committee I've been part of, is when you can mention that maybe you're lacking something that they ask for. This is something I don't have. It's not an experience that I had the chance to develop, but this is something I want to focus on in the next 2 to 3 or 5 years, especially within the position that you're going to get if they hire you, right? So to also promise that you're going to work and you expect to work on those skills or those specific expertise that they ask for in case you miss that. So try also to, play around what you miss and what you lack. They want to see proactivity. They want to see that you're still engaged in developing something that is important to them.
Thanks, Silvia. Michal, you have 2 fingers? Yeah.
Can I have a small finger comment on this?
Yeah, please.
So I do think that the question of type publication number, I think what Sanne and what you said and what Alex said does apply to many countries, including the UK, US, Netherlands to a degree. I think it definitely does not apply to many other countries. In Italy, don't even bother to apply for assistant professor if you don't have 15 publications. 15 journal papers. Because it's seen as a magic number, 15 for some reason. In Germany, from what I hear from people and from experience that I gathered somehow, it seems that small number is acceptable, but they really have to be good journals. So like, one ISS is not going to impress anyone. If you have a book, so the numbers really do matter.
Yeah. So
in many countries, yeah, in Europe.
So that's one of those cases where doing the homework and looking at the different institutions and what they would expect in a CV could help. But I still would not refrain or that you say that no one bothers applying. I still think I still think there's no bother, there's no huge cost. I mean, you do have to tailor your application profile a little bit and send it out, but I think it's still important to signal that you're willing to apply, etc. So, but maybe if there's cultural differences or institutional differences that I was missing.
If I may, on the Italian comment.
Yeah, Silvia. Yeah, on the Italian comment, Silvia. I expect
something that I suffered. I suffered for a long time because of that. Because again, coming from the Italian academia, I was so scared that I was just publishing again in minor journals because I needed to prove that I had a research outputs out there, right? So even in my PhD dissertation, my supervisor wanted me to go for a university press, but I was so anxious that I went with Routledge, which is a great publishing house, right? But I think now, after many years, I would have gone and take longer to publish in a university press, even as an Italian asking or applying for a job in Italy, because I feel I have the impression that things are changing in Italy as well. In terms of hiring committees, we are not just looking at, the long list of publications in journals that are not that good. But I think that things are changing there and they look more for the quality of the publication that you have. Obviously, there is the question of the abilitazione, the habilitation, depending on the country where you are, where they look at the quantity of the outputs that you have, but they look more and more at the quality as well. So I see some changes happening. So again, I would encourage to balance and to differentiate the portfolio between faster and less, let's say, high quality publications as slower and big quality, big journals kind of publications.
Yeah, no, actually, I also think there's another cultural specialties, the French academic market. So you could have a lot of publications, but if you don't have at least 1 or 2 French-speaking publications, you're not even going to be, even if you have APSR, you're not even going to be shortlisted. Right? So there's also that thing that take into account that you also have to tailor to these national cultural institutional specialties. So use your networks, talk to colleagues that are in that particular market or have been teaching in a particular institution in a particular country to get to know how to tailor your own profile to a particular institution. Yeah, any other questions or comments?
Should we talk a little bit more about like what the interview looks like and the job flyout?
Yeah,
Anybody interested in that?
an interview process.
Okay, so a Zoom interview. So the ones that they do in US, I don't know if this is true for Europe, but it's about 30 minutes. It's with your committee members. They will ask you typically pretty standardized questions, like what's your research agenda? What's your teaching portfolio? How do you fit in the institution or something? And then you all, like, what you want to do is you want to be able to answer each of those questions in the shortest amount of time. So there's enough time to get to more questions. So don't answer one question in 5 minutes. Like that's way too long. Time each answer for about 2 to 3 minutes. So there's plenty of questions they can ask you. They will also give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end. Use that question very strategically. So for example, I knew that the Pardee school, I mean, it's interdisciplinary. They're really proud of being an interdisciplinary department. And I wanted to signal that I care about the interdisciplinarity, which is not hard because I do. So my question was, how do you see interdisciplinarity in the department happen on a daily basis? What does it look like on a daily basis to be an interdisciplinary department? And I use that question just to signal my interest in that part that they really care about. So you want to prep a question like that. For the job, for the flyouts, so US version is 2 days. You have one-on-one meetings with faculty. They're about 30 minutes each, and you go from one faculty member to the other. You don't get a break, like it's really intense. Wear comfortable shoes because you have to walk around the entire place. Also bring snacks because there are breakfast, dinners, and lunches, but you don't actually often get to eat because people will just keep firing questions at you. So have like some stupid snacks in your bag so you can like energize when you need it. They also don't, you can ask for a bathroom break. They often forget to give you bathroom breaks, just FYI. So bring water, don't drink too much water. Okay, that was maybe a weird thing to say, but at least that's what how I strategize. I had a folder with everybody who I was meeting, with their profile, with what I was going to talk to them about. There's also lists going around, and I'm happy to share with people who want afterwards with like questions you can ask of faculty members, of students, and because you also be talking to the dean or like leadership of the university or the department. Those you ask different questions to. There you will ask questions about tenure requirements, like all this kind of more admin related stuff. So there's these long lists with questions you can ask to each of the audiences. The job doc itself for US version is 40 minutes and then like 15 minutes or something Q&A. What are tips and tricks there? Yeah. Oh, one thing about notes, because I think you might have memorized your talk. So I have the same thing as Silvia. I'm not a native English speaker and I get very nervous about forgetting my lines. So even though the advice is to memorize your talk, I actually have a printed version and I have highlighted the things that I need, and that helps me stay calm when I give these talks. So like do whatever makes you feel comfortable in these talks. If you need notes like me, print out notes, right? Like the key is that you're comfortable, that you can ask the questions, bring enthusiasm to your questions. It's gonna really convince people. Yeah, anything else?
So regardless of whether you're memorized or not, write a script.
Yeah, right. It's great.
I suppose I have a few things to add. One is that something is going to go wrong. So at my City University of London talk itself was given in an extremely small seminar room. I'm not claustrophobic, but I definitely felt claustrophobic. I felt like I could literally elbow the chair of the department right next to me. It was just so packed. And I was just thrown into it, and it was a little hard to gather myself. At Waterloo, for whatever reason, my slides did not work, and I had to change the color of the background within like 2 minutes of giving it. So pretty stressful. So these sorts of things are going to go wrong, and you just have to prepare and just roll with it. Some people say if you have the opportunity to go to the room in which you give the job talk earlier in advance, do so just to set yourself up. Because something could go awry and you want to be best prepared for handling that situation.
Yeah, these really trivial logistics, like having a USB key or having a backup email, because in the route, like we had yesterday when we were preparing revisions, you know, these things you want to prepare a bit in advance. So it's okay to ask the staff, the support staff in the institute where you'll be visiting to do the job talk to get early in the room, etc. And talking about questions, if there's anything, because the job talks in Europe are very different. They're 15 to 20 minutes presentation and then maybe 20 minutes questions. So it's much shorter. And sometimes the brief, you carefully read the brief, but the brief might be still ambiguous. They talk about a research program, present a research program, or present a research project, or something in the middle, right? So if you're not sure, I've seen so many job talks that the candidate was probably first in the profile after the Skype or Zoom interviews and came on site and did not follow any of the instructions and was cut out after presenting only half of the talk after 20 minutes, right? So these things, it's okay to send follow-up questions to the hiring committee trying to clarify the structure. People are not going to be frustrated by these questions. It shows interest, right? It shows that you want to get this right. So don't feel don't think that it's actually going to hurt you to ask these logistical questions. But I think a lot of these advice do matter. I would argue I'm not for the memorizing. I would say because sometimes when you over prepare, especially in the questions that you get in the interview phase, maybe not in the job talk, you over prepare a question which you don't even listen to the question you're going to get, and we've seen that. And you start answering something that's tangent, maybe a little bit close, but still not exactly what that person was looking for. And you see this happening in a few times because people are anxious that have over prepared. And I like in the European context, you're not going to have the 2-day process. You're going to basically have the job talk, eventually teaching demo with a group of students that have been picked to be in the room or going to give their evaluation. And you're going to meet a hiring committee. And the hiring committee, at least in the Netherlands, are composed mainly of a series of colleagues from different, I think, experience, so junior and more senior. And there's going to be a student member. So the student member, we would argue, maybe doesn't have that much power. It's mostly going to be the academic staff that's going to decide. But actually, the student, what I've noticed being on these hiring committees, the student member has a lot of input, and a lot of decisive input. And so you're going to make sure that you take very seriously the questions, which are mainly going to be about your teaching philosophy, what are the kind of teaching methods. So think about some anecdote about your teaching, about something that student can relate to directly, and you can prepare those questions. It's mostly going to be what are kind of new teaching methods or methodologies. How do you keep the interest of student? That usually always comes up, right? So think about some neat tricks that you can mention of clear anecdotes in that particular context. Alex, yeah.
Now that you mention it, so one thing that is peculiar to the UK system is that you actually meet your competition, which can be a little weird. So again, roll with it. Be a good human being. Don't be a jerk, because you'll never know. You might meet them again. But it is weird. So be prepared for that. If you apply to liking them and actually succeed in getting an interview.
I don't know if it still happens in the Netherlands, in some other institutions, but in Leiden, there's still sometimes dinners with, they organize the dinner. So you still have dinners with colleagues from the institute, but sometimes they organize the dinner with all the candidates that are on the same table with colleagues, and that could be very awkward. So try to figure ways to not, you don't want to be a jerk trying to overpower, distinguish yourself, and or undermine the other person that's at the table. So that's clearly because on the end we want to be a colleague with some of this, and they're going to see these social cues, etc. So, but there's some institutions that you still meet your competition. Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
two team thoughts for the questions you get during the job talk. What I always do is, because you can write something down, but rather than write the question down, I write my answer down, but not full. Like I have like 3-4 buzzwords for what I want to say, so that when I answer the question, I make sure that I hit all the points and I don't go too long, right? Everything has to be brief. Like, for example, if I get a question about, let's say, so I make an ideational argument. So I often get questions about, but what about organizational culture, right? So I'll go, okay, an organizational culture argument would predict this. I don't agree with this. My theory says why. Here's a piece of empirical evidence that I didn't present in the job talk, but that's something extra that shows you why my argument is right over an organizational cultural argument. And that is a really brief packaged answer. And so I'll write down 3 words, like write prediction, my theory, prediction, the other theory, and then like the example that I want to talk about. And that's kind of the way you can potentially structure a question. For teaching demos, I don't know if you guys agree, but what I did in my teaching demo is I wanted to really show pedagogical breadth. So rather than anything else, I made sure that there were a lot of exercises. So there was a part where I lectured, then there was a small, like a think, pair, share with the students. Then there was a small group exercise. So I basically made sure that I demonstrated to the people who were observing the teaching that I could do a lot of different things in the classroom. That's maybe something practical as well.
And I'm looking at time, we're losing, Silvia, maybe do you have any closing inside statement, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah.
Not really, nothing super new. I will just emphasize again of being a nice colleague and being a nice person. Obviously, this is very personal. We all have our different characters, right? But I think it's nice to show when you are a collaborative colleague, and you can be also helping other colleagues when there is a need and when there is a necessity. So what happens to me and what I've seen in different hiring committees is that you're not always looking for the rising star in the field. You're not always looking for the top researcher ever, at least in Europe and at least in the Netherlands, but you're also looking for someone that can help out in the institute and in the department, someone you can get along with, right? Not someone who's only focusing on in their research and isolating themselves in their research, because this might not be constructive and might not be useful within the departmental politics, let's say. So focus also on having a joke, right? If something goes wrong during the presentation, in my 2 job interviews, the slides didn't work for either of those. So I had a little joke just to say, you know, just to break the ice and show that you can still be a nice human being to work with. And I think this is a very important skill that sometimes is overlooked.
Yeah, no.
But don't be a comedian in your job.
No, obviously.
Yeah.
Always have to have a good.
Right,
It's not a good time to practice your comedy act.
All right. Well, thanks. I want to ask everybody to join us in thanking this panel for providing all these insights on whatever agency you still have on that market, where there's a lot of things that you can't unfortunately control. But EISS wants to provide more support to our junior membership, and so any advice you can have following this meeting or in the future about other things we could do, workshops, etc., to help the online, for instance, following not just in the context of the annual conference, we're really looking forward to or encouraging more input from you guys. So we hope this discussion can follow in the next conferences and the other EISS events. So thanks, Alex, Sanne, Silvia, and thank you everybody for showing up early this morning, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you all.